Hi, I'm Tom Estabrook from Estabrooks. We have two locations in Yarmouth, Maine and Kennebunk, Maine. We're a family-owned garden center here in Maine, and we have three generations involved. I'm part of the third generation, along with my cousin John and my brother Mike. And today we're talking about the resurgence of gardening with a new generation. Let's talk a little bit about how gardening through the last few years has kind of surged back to one of a more popular pastime with COVID specifically. With people having more time, they all of a sudden were spending more time at home working, had more flexible time, and were able to get back into gardening with not only indoors but also outdoors. So, you know, gardening kind of started off a couple years ago. We saw a huge resurgence in succulent gardening, okay, and air plants. They were extremely popular. They're very low maintenance. You can put them in high light and low light, and it really just kind of got people interested. Through social media, these things bloomed into, you know, a movement by not only older gardeners but also young, newer generations getting involved, and we're still seeing that today. After that, houseplants. Houseplants become extremely popular. This is Monstera. You can see the nice variegation in the leaves. This plant became extremely popular along with our whole houseplant department. So it started kind of building momentum within the home. And, you know, now people are very enthused about collecting rare houseplants. So anytime we put on our social media a rare houseplant, people come flocking in looking for them. It's a very exciting, you know, collector's market right now, and supply and demand is really running rampant in houseplants. The nurseries down in Florida that we buy from and across the country are really struggling to keep up with demand at this point. So it's really tough to find rare houseplants. As we get towards the end of summer and fall, a lot of that inventory is going to start to show up again. So, you know, it all started within the home and home decor, beautifying the home, adding, you know, value, and really making your environment better indoors was very helpful through the last couple years. It brightened our mood. It helped clean our oxygen in our homes. So a lot of really positive attributes from, you know, houseplants and creating that environment that made us feel a little bit better about everything we've been going through. And as we got towards spring, there was a huge resurgence in whether or not the food supply chain was going to be able to handle the demand. So people started switching over to thinking about growing their own food. Now, this is not something that's new. Obviously, this has happened over many, many years that people have been getting back into vegetable gardening, but we saw a really big resurgence. Now, one thing I wanted to talk about was my parents. My parents, when they were probably my age, I'm in my mid-40s, you know, had young kids in their late 20s, early, you know, were baby boomers. Their incomes really kind of rose very quickly. In this area of Maine, there was a lot of local farms, including Estabrooks. We were a vegetable farm. And vegetables were quite cheap to buy from the farms. So a lot of homeowners stopped vegetable gardening, and hence didn't necessarily teach their kids how to vegetable garden. So we missed a generation of gardeners, which I would include myself. There's this resurgence has happened now where my generation is now wanting to teach their kids how to garden, which is just wonderful. I think it's a great thing to know where your food comes from and how to to produce your own food. And there's nothing better than going out to the garden and picking that lettuce or the cucumbers or the tomatoes to go on your salad that night. There's nothing better than the taste of a tomato or something out of your garden to have at dinner. So we saw this resurgence kind of happening, but my parents, their income rose at a level where they didn't have to vegetable garden. Vegetable gardening was quite cheap. They could go to the local farm, get all the fresh vegetables they wanted, and so we missed that generation. So now that generation's coming back. It's exciting. They want to teach their kids. And so it started out with seeds. So last year we saw seed sales soar. You saw seed shortages. People couldn't get seeds. We maybe even saw people hoarding seeds. It was kind of very hectic. With vegetable garden, there's kind of 3 simple rules we need to think about. Number 1, it all starts out with soil. Okay? So, are you planting in the ground? Are you building a raised bed? Or are you planting in containers? So, with vegetable gardening, you can do all 3, and there are probably many other ways to vegetable garden also, but those are the 3 major ways that I like to think about vegetable gardening. So in the ground, obviously, you've got your natural soil, you work the soil, and you plant into your natural soil. With a raised bed, you build a structure to house that soil, and you fill the structure with either local topsoil loam or some sort of raised bed gardening mix from a bag. And then thirdly, you have everything from fabric type containers to plastic pots or what other type of container, window box that you want to put on your deck, patio, or whatnot. There's no wrong way to go about it. It's just really, let's talk about the differences and why you may do one over the other. So the best way really is in the ground. And why is in the ground the best way? Well, we've got natural organisms, natural nutrients. We've got water holding capacity. Now, obviously, depending on your soil, that can be good or bad. And that's the reason why containers and raised beds are important tools also. So raised beds basically are building some sort of structure, whether it be wood, concrete, whatever you so choose, to hold soil above ground. And this basically is a great way to define your garden space and also bring architecture into your garden too. So sometimes raised bed gardening is used also for aesthetic reasons. So this allows you to give, defined spaces for your garden. It also allows you to build structures in an architectural way to enhance your yard. So a lot of times when we're designing vegetable garden areas, raised beds are incorporated for those reasons. Fencing, arbors, all of those types of things. So with raised bed gardening, though, you do have a couple downfalls. Number 1, the beds can dry out faster than in the ground. Okay? Now you would say, why is that? Well, anytime we raise soil above grade, you're going to drain through a little bit faster, and that in turn may make you need to water a little bit quicker. Not a big problem because most of us have accessibility to water pretty easily. But raised bed gardens also limit the space in which we can expand. So each time you want to expand, you need to build another structure and add another piece to the puzzle. Typically, a lot of people are building, say, 8 by 12 or 6 by 12 or whatever size raised bed you have. Now, when we think about in terms of spacing of plants, the inkling is to put a lot of plants in that small space, when in fact, one tomato plant, you really need to give a 3 foot by 3 foot space. So that eats up a lot of square footage when you're talking, a 6 by 12 foot raised bed. You take a lot of space with one plant. If you're adding cucumbers, zucchini, squash, anything like that, with a few plants, your bed is completely full. And this is one of the things that customers make a mistake and put too much in a small space, and then they have more disease and insect problems. So the third way for us to vegetable garden would be in containers. Now, obviously we have terracotta and glazed pots on our patios, decks, all of those. That's great to incorporate vegetables, and you can also incorporate a few flowers with them also. This is a nice way to bring beauty to your containers, but also maybe you put a tomato plant in the center, you know, on a nice trellis, and that allows you to get some food. Or you put some flowers in that are taller, and you put maybe some thyme that weeps over the side, and maybe some other herbs or vegetables that also do the same. We also have these grow bags. Okay, and these come in a various amount of sizes. Some of them are, 6 by 8 and can be used as a raised bed, but they're kind of disposable after a short period of time. So, I like to use containers that I can use year after year after year, but these are a great way to add. The only thing I would be cautious about is you want to make sure you don't put these on a patio, like a stone patio, or your deck, because you could either rot your deck or you could stain your patio. The leaching of nutrients and soil through the bag onto your patio or deck could create problems longer term. So putting this on a gravel area or on your lawn, yes, it will kill the lawn, but it also won't dry out quite as quickly. The other piece with these bags is, if you think of this in terms of like a sponge, this will wick the moisture away, and as the wind blows on this, it will suck the water out of your soil. So you also can have to water quite a bit more with these grow bags. So those are the three general ways I personally like to plant directly into the ground. I think it's the best way. I like the raised bed for the architectural piece, and I think that's really important, especially if you are planning on some sort of garden element in your yard that it's a focal point. Now let's talk a little bit about vegetables. Vegetables are not neat and tidy. Vegetables are messy. There are going to be things that have yellow leaves and don't look good all the time. So when you put these on your deck or patio, you're going to have some things that don't look as good. So when I'm placing my vegetable garden, I'm always looking for what's the best sunlight, a minimum of 6 hours of direct sunlight at some point during the day, whether it be morning, middle of the day, or end of day. I don't care what time. The end of day having a little shade is not a bad thing. It will take the heat of the day away. But I'm also looking for a less focal spot because of the mess. I don't want it right off my patio where I'm going to entertain and kind of be, in that situation where I'm constantly feeling like I have to garden every time I go out on the patio and sit. So be mindful about where you place your vegetable garden, because there are going to be some uglies in your vegetable garden, and it's not going to be as manicured as you think you might want. So placement of your garden is really, really important. So next, let's talk about to seed or not to seed. That's the question, okay? So when we're thinking about planting our vegetable garden, we need to make choices that are best for, number one, our time, number two, our energy, and number three, our pocketbook, okay? So when we're talking about vegetable plants, the ones you would come to the garden center and purchase, it's always best to purchase the largest plants you can afford. Basically, here in Maine, we have a fairly short gardening season. So it's important to buy time if you can, okay? And buying larger plants typically means you're buying a few weeks of time that here at the garden center, we've actually spent the time to grow the plants longer, okay? That will get your yield and your fruit much quicker. And, with certain things like peppers, for instance, it's a really good way to go because it's a fairly long crop. you will start to get peppers and tomatoes earlier by buying a few larger plants. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to. Plants will catch up very quickly, okay? So the bigger thing is planning out your garden, not coming to the garden center and just buying a bunch of stuff, bringing it home, and then going, oh my gosh, I put all of these plants in a 4 by 12 foot space, and after about 3 weeks, everything's growing together. So understand what the space requirements are for each plant. A tomato, a cucumber, squash, corn, all of these things are going to take up a lot of space. So I would always recommend understanding a tomato is going to be like 3 foot by 3 foot. If we put it in a small space and plant a lot of them, you're going to have more disease problems, okay? Blights, root rots, all kinds of other problems, okay? So making sure you have good spacing, good airflow around your plants is extremely important. So there's two things. You come to the garden center and you buy your plants, or maybe you start your plants. So this was that Resurgence we saw. So this is a mini greenhouse. They're very simple. It has a plastic dome that goes over the top for germination. It's important not to start your seedlings too early. At this point, it's pretty late to start your seedlings. You would be starting directly into the ground at this point here in Maine. So if you were starting your seedlings, you want to be mindful that this little pack of seeds has a lot of seeds, and if you seed them all into seed trays, you basically either need to share them with friends and not plant them all in your garden, or you need to expand your garden. So, you know, we'll see customers come in and they'll buy 15 or 20 packets of seeds. That's probably enough seeds for probably 20 gardens, okay? So understand, if you buy a packet of tomatoes, there may be 20 or 30 or 50 seeds in there. You may get 50 tomato plants. That's going to be way too many tomato plants for your small army at home, I suspect. Okay, one tomato plant is going to give you about 30 pounds of yield typically in a season. So if you have 3 plants, that's 90 pounds of tomatoes. You're going to be making a lot of sauce and a lot of salsa, okay? And or giving them to your neighbors, friends, and food pantries, okay? Not a bad thing, just something to keep in mind. So when you're seeding things, you want to be mindful about what you're going to use the most of, okay? And you also want to think about maybe doing multiple seedings, okay? Talk with your local garden center about how to do this. It's kind of tricky. It's kind of tough to do inside, but it's a great project to do with the kids, okay? So success is not always the end goal, but also a teaching moment with seeding is a really great opportunity, okay? So you can start things indoors, probably sometime around the 1st of April, maybe a little earlier depending on what it is if it's a long crop, but things will grow very quickly inside without a lot of sunlight. So you want to make sure and have maybe a grow light, and you also might want to have a bright indirect light spot where you can start to harden them off and get them outside. So hardening your plants off, let's talk a little bit about that, because we can't just take them from a seed tray and put them out into the garden. We have to be mindful of wind, sun, cold, heat, all kinds of different things. So we can't just take them from indoors and put them right outside and think they're going to thrive. It's important for about a week to acclimate your plants to outdoors. I usually try to take stuff and put it in kind of a filtered light situation first on a calm, not windy day. If you put them out in the wind directly, you can get windburn and ruin all your hard work. And then slowly work them into the sunlight so that they don't get sunburn, okay? So, you know, those things will acclimate them and you're ready to plant. When coming to the garden center, a lot of that has been done, but it's still important to harden your plants off. Some things are coming out of the greenhouse and it's not the same as going right into natural sunlight. So taking those cucumber plants and zucchini plants, planting them into the ground, and then just taking a piece of newspaper and putting over for a few days so that it filters the light is a good way to go to give them some natural time to kind of get acclimated. If you do get sunburn, it's probably going to grow out of it, or it may be a replacement situation. So here we are, we're at that point where we're thinking about planting, and you've come to the garden center, you've purchased your stuff. You also want to think about seeding at this time in the garden. So here's some of the different things that you would want to seed in. So peas are a great one. Here in Maine, we always look to seed these in around Patriots Day, okay, in April. Your corn's direct seed. We sell it as plants, but it's really better to go by seed. Lettuce. Now, if you're doing head lettuce, I always recommend you buy a couple small packages of lettuce to plant directly that are growing from the garden center, but then you buy some leaf lettuce seed that you can reseed as soon as you start harvesting that lettuce. Beans, beets, carrots, all of those are really great to go direct into the ground. Now, you shouldn't be afraid of seed. It's a fairly easy process. Talk with your local garden center. They can help walk you through. There's going to be some trials and error with vegetable gardening. Don't be afraid of that, okay? Now, with plants, we get out in the garden, we plant. Now it's time to think about fertility and making sure that your plants are happy. Now, Garden Tone's a great one by Espoma. Now, I usually tell people, do not add fertilizer first thing in the season, okay? It's important first thing in the season to really just think about not fertilizing. Get your plants in the ground, make them happy, get them rooted, and then if your plants look a little bit off color, then think about what I call side dress the rows, meaning take a few handfuls, put it around, water it in. We do not want too much fertility here on your plants because we want them to fruit, not just grow, okay? So too much fertilizer can be a negative, okay? We also have a product from Coast of Maine, okay? This is Stonington Blend, and this is a really great organic way also to add nutrients and a lot of micronutrients. And these products are really great because they're high in micronutrients and great for those containers and raised beds because you're adding those natural microorganisms to the soil, which is really important. So, once we've done all of that, then we're really in the growing season. At that point, your disease and your insects can start to attack, but don't be wary of that. Be mindful, okay? Keep an eye on your vegetable garden. Come in, visit your local garden center. We're here to help, and I hope this was helpful to kind of understand the resurgence of gardening, and hopefully in the future you continue to build your gardening ways in your yard, and we're here to help as your local garden center. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch this webinar, and thank you, and we'll see you soon at the Garden Center.